everyone. Welcome to Console Room, 10 Years in the TARDIS, and welcome to the Lost and Found Episodes panel. My name is Gordon Domowski. I am the lead organizer with Chicago Doctor Who Meetup. I am also a new pulp author, and I hope you're all having fun at Console Room, whether you are in person or virtual or hybrid. We welcome you to our panel. And now let's go around with introductions. Ben, will you please share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Ben Ellis. I have been a part of Console Room for 10 years. I am in charge of the Console Room Players, which is a group of us who got together to record radio plays of missing episodes. Because I'm a big and we're talking about missing episodes today. I'm a big fan. So I thought to myself one day, why not adapt these into radio plays since we had nothing to do during the pandemic? So, hi.
Okay, and Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, my name is Rob Levy. I'm a published author in a couple books for Cosmic Press on Doctor Who, and also ATB Press on Doctor Who. And I've been doing Doctor Who panels for years with Dragon Con and Chicago TARDIS and a couple other conventions in and around the world and places. And it's great to be here.
Okay, thanks. And I'd like to kick off the panel by asking the obvious question. You know, when we talk about Doctor Who missing episodes, how did we get here? Why are we talking about Doctor Who missing episodes other than Console Room asked us to?
Pretty much because Console Room asked us to. No, I'm being cheeky. The reason we're talking about them basically goes back to the BBC. Now, for everyone knows what a videotape is, it's the size of a football, let's say, American football. The British had the early type of videotape technology to record their shows, but unfortunately, they had to. And this is anybody who would be making a choice recording. You could have either recorded Doctor Who, or you could record a Mozart symphony. And 9 times out of 10, they would choose to record the Mozart symphony, which they had a bunch of copies of already. So basically, a lot of episodes got recorded over. But what also happened too is a lot of episodes were sent to other countries throughout the 60s and early 70s. And these episodes were at the TV station still. They might have been destroyed. But the start of how the Finding Doctor Who episodes goes back to a fan by the name of Ian Levine, who in the mid-70s contacted Sue Malden, who was the BBC's archive selector, about missing Doctor Who episodes. And the story he tells, I believe it's in one of the documentaries, is that the first time he met with Sue, he saw all 7 negatives and positives of the Daleks, and he saved that. So that was kind of the start. That started Ian hunting for missing episodes. That was Ian kind of started the hunt, so to speak.
Okay, and so with how these were distributed, now that I think one of the things, and Rob, maybe you can speak to this. Not only did they have film copies, but we also had sound versions, sound recordings of missing episodes.
Yeah, I think where it gets interesting too is that all of us are hoarders and all of us have issues with storing our cool stuff. And I think the BBC, the big reason for doing this wasn't out of malice; it was more out of a sense of they needed efficiency. They needed a way to store videotapes and to store their new stuff that was sort of self-generating and self-perpetuating. And they did not have the foresight to see that any of this stuff, not just Doctor Who, like little hour-long TV variety shows, talk shows, everything, right? They just didn't think there'd be a future market for this stuff. So that is kind of how we got there. Now, what's interesting is that both professionally and amateurly, people recorded all the audio. So like most of the audio still ran on a separate audio track. So a lot of the times, they weren't in a need for space for audio tapes as much as they were videotapes, right? You have to remember it's Stair Britain and everything. People are reusing everything, and culturally, it's hard to get stuff. But audio recordings, there was still a lot of the audio recordings of some of these episodes. First of all, with the BBC. Second is fans would, when Doctor Who was on, they didn't necessarily have the means to video record
No,
episodes
VCR wasn't
of
a thing till the 80s.
no,
So
yeah. Well, some people in the industry could have rudimentary,
true.
but it was cumbersome and it was clunky.
Mhm.
So because we didn't have video recording at the time, or the average person couldn't afford a way to video record, whether it's through their own video setup system that's like the size of a small house at the time, or through basically running a camera and recording it off the TV with a film camera, right?
Yes.
A lot of people would then record it with the audio because that was the way they could keep it. So a lot of fans kept audio recordings of the Doctor Who episodes as a way to sort of like, hey, I want to see this again, or I want to know what's going on. And they had that. And I don't think a lot of them did it with an eye towards, 30, 40, 50 years later. I think a lot of it is like, hey, did I miss something? Or they were just fans of the show. So as a result, we ended up getting really good audio for some episodes and okay audio that, thanks to modern technology, we could restore audio, right? So we have a full run of audio, which is pretty amazing.
Which I think is great.
Which is terrific. And so having that audio, right, this is important to understand because this is the basic bulwark of which everything stands on. Because we have the audio, right, we could do the telesnaps. Yes. And basically, a telesnap basically is production photos or pictures that people had from the production, or just any kind of photo related that could assemble the story visually through photographs, sort of like a Viewmaster, if you will. Kids, ask your parents, right? And you could play the audio with the Viewmaster. So you had some way to reconstruct old episodes so we could enjoy them. Yes, it was clunky. Yes, it was crude. Yes, it was not the best way to enjoy it. But you could at least have the audio with the video with some visual form to give you something, right? And this gave us both an audio history of the show and sort of a documented fan legacy of the show too, right?
And, and at the time too, Rob, it was a way to see the episode that you couldn't see.
Yeah.
Because I just remember I got the reconstruction of Web of Fear and I wore it out.
Yeah.
Because here was the telesnaps of Web of Fear with the audio and with episode 1 at the time, which was the only episode existing. I thought it was just a great representation.
And the telesnaps, I think, really took off, at least for a lot of people I know, during the dormant years. A lot of people started really paying more attention to telesnap reconstructions, or really sort of trying to, hey, let's find the episodes we haven't done and reconstruct them, because there wasn't any new Who, so they could take a little more time doing it, right? But basically, so like if Ben's at home and he's watching Moonbase, and he does not have a job where he works as a production engineer in a studio, audio or visually, or working TV or whatever, so he doesn't have the home editing equipment at home to do all this, and he doesn't have enough film in his camera to record, 900 hours of Doctor Who. He's going to do audio recording of it, and that way he can keep it. But also, I heard one fan talk about this, that it was a way he kept his kids busy, because he could play it back later and they'd all sit around and listen to it, So a lot of this was fans that were excited. A lot of it was, people trying to calm hyperactive children. And a lot of it is just, people wanted it for sort of a backup, so they could rediscover the episodes because they didn't repeat them, right?
Yeah, and eventually the BBC, in looking at these trends, took the actual soundtracks, would write and have performers record linking narration.
Yes.
And so those had audiobooks. So you could still get the story, because a lot of Doctor Who, because it's visual, you'd have these long kind of passages of what's going on. But you could have that linking narration where it was a way to get this as much story without the photos.
Yeah. And I remember the first time when I was getting reconstruction, I got some audio. And one of the audios I first got was Marco, and this was before the narration, was Marco Polo. And there are certain points, in Marco Polo, where you just hear a lot of banging going on. But with the narration that is in that the BBC put out, it makes things a lot more clear.
Yeah, so you have what's described, what's going on, and then eventually, As of 2016, we started seeing animated reconstructions of missing
Yes.
episodes.
Hmm. And they've so far I've really enjoyed them. You know,
Mhm.
all of them that I've seen. You know, and it just makes me really happy that I can watch the Power of the Daleks now. You know,
Yeah,
where
and
and
and it's great too because from my perspective, I was always curious about that second year of Troughton, which
hmm
goes from Tomb to Evil to Abominable Snowmen to Ice
hmm
Warriors to Web of Fear to Enemy of the World to Fury of the Deep, and now
hmm
we have it, a lot of it in animated
yes,
form,
yes, thank goodness. And I think that's great. And as you guys know, they're not doing the animations anymore
right?
because of BBC America. I mean, I hope my hope of hopes is one day they'll go back to doing them. You know, doesn't look
My
very likely, but
my hope is that somebody sort of stepped back from it and said, okay, let's look at the cost, the time spent, and I hope it's a case of reevaluating efficiency and process. They're like, okay, do we have the
mhm.
technology to do this better? Do we have a place we can outsource it, not have to do it? You know, I'm hoping that it's just them sort of putting a pause button on it
Yeah.
to, you know, and I know that it's not looking that way, but my hope is that, you know, somebody somewhere who has some control over some of the stuff, it realizes that there is money in this, right? And yes, some of the,
hmm
you know, the Reign of Terror is not the best selling DVD in the Doctor Who classic series video DVD collection, but um, fans will buy it to have it
Oh
be
yeah.
complete in their collection, and fans will explore that. There is an interesting, um, you know, segment of people that want this. And I think
Yeah.
it's big enough that it's worth at least break even money. But I
hmm
think they're looking, I think someone somewhere hopefully is looking at, you know, sort of like a NASA, bigger, leaner, faster, right?
hmm
Um, Finding a way to do it where it's not so time consuming, where the animation can get better.
hmm
And, you know, there's so many people doing animation. There's so many people that have animation houses. There's so many DIY people doing
Oh
animation.
yeah.
These are going to happen organically no matter what. Somebody's going to do an anime reconstruction of their own anyway.
hmm
Why not put it out and make, you know, your money off of it and officialize it? But I
hmm
think some of it too is just the research for actors equity and things. What actors
hmm
are alive? Who would we have to pay? You know, I think as we go deeper down the rabbit hole of uh, the missing episodes, you know, unlike America, where everything's just kind of blanket covered, in Britain, the
hmm
rules for actors and performers getting paid are different. So they
Yes.
have to track down relatives of, like, if somebody's dead and they're in an episode, they got to track down somebody who's in their family,
Yep.
as I understand it, to get them to sign off on it. And so I think there's a lot of parts in motion for the animation.
hmm
Um, you know, but you know, it's also time consuming because you have to fix the sound and the audio,
hmm
and you have to get in people maybe to re-record audio, and then you have to find
True.
people. So I think the day is going to come when it'll happen as an officially sanctioned
hmm
release, right? I think it's, but I do think, while I think that, you know, eventually we'll get more of these sort of as an official channel, the days of people making their own animated things, that's only going to get bigger.
Yeah. Oh,
We're going to see
definitely.
more and more of it happening.
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think we're going to see basically because if you go to YouTube, you can find all sorts of fan animations of any missing episode, and I
hmm
think that we're going to see basically Telesnaps 2.0, where you're going to get
Yeah.
and I think part of the in terms of missing episodes, I think part of the issue um, with the BBC America stopping it is that it was starting to get to the point where it wasn't as profitable as they would have liked. And I think that's where, and I know you might disagree with that, but I kind of think it's also with Troughton, it makes sense because we have a lot of Troughton missing.
Yeah.
With Power of the Daleks, it was his 50th anniversary debut. Of course, you're going to do that because we don't have it in the vault. And I
hmm
think, they kind of went down the line with, okay, they did Shada, which not really missing, but can't change that. But
It was good for what it was.
right. Um, And so, we've been talking about animation and versus telesnaps versus audio. Let me just throw this out there. When you're looking at, when you want to enjoy a missing episode, what is your preferred medium?
It honestly, it depends on my mood. It depends on the episode. For example, if I was to watch The Invasion, I would watch the official DVD release of The Invasion because that's pretty well animated. I wouldn't watch the loose cannon version because that's just a bunch of different pictures they collected because I don't believe there were not telesnaps taken for The Invasion.
Right.
But let's say it's something like The Abominable Snowman. I'll watch the loose cannon reconstruction because I enjoy it and it's really well done.
Mm-hmm.
Just it depends on the episode for me.
I think that for me, if it's like an official DVD release or streaming release, that's the way to go. Just because I know production wise, I'm lazy. I won't have to fix with anything. It's a sign of technology and then our attention spans. Where the telesnaps now are like they're cool, but you're watching it the whole time. You're like, okay, I know there's something better, right? And that's always kind of in the back of your head.
Yeah.
So I am open to the DVDs, and I'm open to like YouTube interpretations. And if nothing else, I will just listen to the audios. Like I'm fortunate that we have a public library system here near me that has, the audios for lots of episodes, and I can go to the library and check them out and listen to them if I don't have them.
And the Hennepin County Library System here in Minneapolis has all of them as well too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so does Chicago.
And so that there's that. I think though that one potential new avenue for this that we've sort of been talking about this kind of off camera as we've been recording panels for Console Room. We've been talking about the Daleks graphic novel that's out, right? And how great it is and how much people love it. I think there's a market for doing some of the missing episodes as graphic novels. That doesn't mean they won't do them anything else, but I think that's a direction we're going to start to see too.
I would buy them if they were out there not available. That sounds great.
Yeah, and I think we've got, in the same way that animation has progressed, Doctor Who and comics has progressed so much that that would work too. So I think my first format would be like, hey, I'd like to put in a DVD with the animated reconstruction. Then I think I want a graphic novel. Then I think I want the telesnaps. But I can always listen to the audios. One of the nice things about that is, the missing episodes let you have the theater of the mind, and really imagine what that is. And, for many people who are fans, like I started watching in '83, and then when I started hearing audios of missing episodes, it was like, oh, that's what they sound like, right? Or like, oh, that's Katarina, or that's Stephen Taylor. That was pretty cool. You got really excited about that. So I'm hoping that that's kind of where we're going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to missing episodes, if they're not animated or already on DVD, like my preference is audio, because with audio, the special effects budget is infinite. So I can kind of create things in my head. If I'm curious, I might go to a telesnap, because if there are adequate, scenes from the show, that would be that way I can see like this is how it would have looked. I know there are some episodes where there are no telesnaps. Like I think the Myth Makers is one of those. And I grew up as a huge Greek Roman history buff, so I'd always wanted to see that, but there are very few actual on-set photos. It was a little off-putting, but it's as we've talked before, we've had a whole bunch of episode finds. Like years ago, there was the one, The Lion, the episode of The Crusade.
Yep.
Then we had the one episode of Galaxy 4. And then 10 years ago, we had the discoveries of both Web of Fear and Enemy of the World. And I know in the intermediate years since then, we haven't had a lot of Doctor Who finds, but we've had a lot of really unique British television finds. Like
Yeah.
I think Dad's Army. I think we're talking the panel before the panel about some Peter Cook and Dudley Moore shows.
Hmm.
Do either of you see those as like really good harbingers for the discovery of future Doctor Who, missing episodes?
As one of these people that sees that kind of finds some of this stuff Doctor Who adjacent, kind of, anything. I view it as like if we find a silent American film from the 20s, I think it bodes well for Doctor Who. If we found London After Midnight right now, I'd be just as happy as if we found like all the Highlanders, right?
Mm.
Anytime we find a missing film noir or a missing silent film or any type of missing film, I hold out hope for the Doctor Who episodes, because that stuff is far more deterioratable. That's a new word, folks. Material than what we have with Doctor Who. And it wasn't as prolifically spread around the world in many cases, right? So anytime anything like that is found, I get excited. I hold out a little hope. I get really excited when they find other Doctor Who adjacent stuff. Like if they find comedies, they find dramas, because I generally would be just as interested in seeing like a lot of the like 1 hour, theater stuff that they produced for the BBC that went on TV, or other comedy shows or anything, because I just love all of it, So as an Anglophile, I'd be thrilled to see any of it, right? And I think anytime you find any of it, that's good, because that means with that stuff specifically that it tracking down, let's say there's an episode of Blake Seven missing, right? And they track it down to a vault in South Africa, right? They, at least by having the paper trail of the paper trail of them finding what that was, even though it wasn't Doctor Who, may open up a paper trail that leads to other doors that open up to Doctor Who.
Exactly.
Right. And honestly, it's kind of like, well, I know I didn't get what I want, but I'm glad you got something you like too. It's that type of mentality, and we all sort of want everybody's fandom to be great. And I think that anytime they find anything missing that's like, British TV related, it sparks the conversation again about Doctor Who. And I think that helps. But I also think that anytime they find anything that's missing, not only does it spark interest in Doctor Who, it lights a fire under, okay, who are these collectors that have this that aren't sharing? So it's a multi-pronged thing for me.
Yeah. I get excited because, it makes me hold out hope there is Doctor Who out there. But I'm also excited, like, to see this stuff you couldn't see because it was missing. And to pop in that DVD or to watch that streaming service where, let's say they had the episode of the Avengers they discovered a few years ago. I'd be excited to see that. It would give me hope. But I think, like, the biggest thing is it's like a lot of fans are like kind of very narrow, where there's like, if it's not Doctor Who, well, it's not worth any. If it's not missing Doctor Who, it's not worth anything. I don't agree. I think, you have to take the good with the bad, and if you want to embrace it, embrace it.
Yeah.
But, hey, we have these episodes, this is great, but hey, maybe there'll be more Doctor Who down the road.
One of the things they found a couple of years ago that I found endlessly fascinating was they found an interview with William Hartnell after he had left the show. He was in his dressing room for a play, and he did an interview with them. And, I'm always interested in watching interviews with actors in the different parts of things, but like having an interview with William Hartnell where he talks about his career and Doctor Who is just as cool as finding a missing episode, because it gives us a very prolific part of the show's past that's very important. And I love that stuff, right? And when I heard they found that, I was like, ooh, that's cool, right? So there's that aspect of it too, right? And I think 80% of every actor in England has been in Doctor Who. So at some point you're going to find, some of these other missing things are going to have somebody that was in a Doctor Who episode that might be interesting.
Yeah. And what's also interesting, speaking of Hartnell, a few years ago, they found some of his Desert Island Disc interview.
Yes.
And I thought that was great to hear, and he picked Louis Armstrong, which it was even greater in my opinion. But to have those things, or to see like, oh hey, so and so is in Doctor Who, and you see this missing thing. It's great.
Yeah, and I think even like they just found a whole bunch of the missing desert island discs. I think that holds hope for Doctor Who too.
Yeah. Oh,
Right?
definitely.
Yeah,
You know.
and I think part of it is also just you never know where you find stuff. I mean, a few years ago they found the 1916 silent version of Sherlock Holmes with William Gillette.
Mhm.
I think there's a negative in I think a theater in France that had just been sitting there for decades. Um, on the Blu-ray release of the Marx Brothers Paramount films, there's an uncut version of Animal Crackers. There's one very obvious cut in the movie, but there's a couple of small jokes where you literally, as pre-code, so you couldn't get away with them at that time. But it's, to me, discoveries like that always hold out hope, because it's like I'm never going to see. When I was a young Doctor Who fan back in the late 1800s, I said I'm never. I want to see Power of the Daleks, but I'm never going to see it. I want to see Tomb of the Cybermen, but I'm never going to see it.
Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah, when I was really getting into Doctor Who, from 1983 on, you know, I quickly, pretty much after I read Peter Haiting's Doctor Who: A Celebration, and had the killjoy experience of like, thanks for telling me all this stuff I'm not going to get to see. I pretty much would reach out for the Target book, and that was like I'm like, this is as far as I'm going to get, right? And now it's all different.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well, for me, it was when the very first Doctor Who story I ever watched was the Five Doctors on video. And I really liked the character of Jamie. So I did this. So I did some digging on this thing called AOL. And I said, hey, is there any way to see Jamie's first episode? Someone replied, well, it's missing. I'm like, what? It doesn't exist anymore. It's like, and I was just heartbroken because I really liked the character of Jamie and the Five Doctors. But eventually, like 5 years later, I was in England at Forbidden Planet and I was able to buy the Highlanders on CD. So that was something.
yeah, I remember when I was an early Doctor Who fan, the infamous Doctor Who Weekly, which you had to import, had a list of everything that was missing. And it was a huge. And then, like, I think about 8 or 9 years later, they had made like a big discovery of a lot of Hartnells and Troughtons. And channel PBS here showed it like every night for hours on end. I mean, I remember watching War Games at like 11:30 midnight one night, because it was new, it was unique. It was Doctor Who I'd never seen before, and that's kind of like, um, and this is going to lead into my next question, because
Okay.
there's part of me that wants to be that's hopeful, but there's part of me that says, you know what, they're never going to find any new episodes. How would you react to that? What
Never
would your
say
response
never is
be?
my. Sorry. Sorry, was that Gordon?
What would your response be?
Never say never because it seems it's something every time there is a missing episode discovery. Well, that's it. We'll never see anything again. And then, when they found the second episode of Dalek Master Plan, oh, that's it. And then a few years later, it was the Underwater Medicine Galaxy 4. That's it. We're always going to hear that. The thing is, whenever a missing episode is, let's say it is found, let's say, they find something in time for the 60th. We're going to be shocked. But I have this belief that it could happen. And if it doesn't happen, that would suck. But I don't know. I'm an eternal optimist.
Rob?
So, for me, I was a fan of the show, kind of living in, the belief that, I had the Target books and the magazines, and that was going to be it. And then all of a sudden, Gordon, you might remember this too, because I think you're in the same sort of ballpark that I am. Then all of a sudden, they found all of Tomb of the Cybermen. And I think once they found Tomb of the Cybermen, I think that ramped everything up. I think finding that intact and being able to restore it, because like our PBS station, I remember they were like, here's a missing episode, and they showed it like fairly quick after they made it available to the public. That made me sort of like think, well, maybe they'll find more. but I never really thought about it. I mean, I remember being excited about Tomb of the Cybermen, and then there was a really long lull, and I don't think they found anything till the Crusade, right? I might be
Yeah,
wrong.
I think so. I mean, they might have found some. No, well, they didn't find episodes, but they found the Australian film censor clips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, like in terms of an episode, right?
No, it wouldn't have been
Yeah.
until they found the lion. Then, yes.
Yeah. So when they found the lion, it's like, oh, okay. But then when they found, that last big bulk where they found,
Mhm.
Enemy of the World, and that I think that was like, okay, all right. And I also think though too that the ability to find this stuff now, I mean, before you'd almost have to be a librarian using a card catalog to find missing episodes of Doctor Who, right?
True.
Now with technology and digitalization, it's a lot easier because someone in Colorado can track down where episodes are on a computer through archives and things, rather than having to go to England physically and go to 10,000 offices, or go to Mozambique and go to the TV station. The paper trails have gotten easier to maneuver because of digital technology and electronic technology.
Mhm.
So I think that helps. However, we're still hindered by physical space and getting to parts of the world, right?
Yeah.
But I think the way that we look for the episodes has changed. And I think that's really significant, and that's really giving me hope. I was not super optimistic that they were going to find things before they found Tomb of the Cybermen. And then when it was crickets, I started going to a couple conventions. And, you always kept hearing collectors have things, but you're never going to see them, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, when are these people going to die? I mean, this is horrible. But it's going to take, I'm pessimistic that they're going to find a lot. It's going to take them finding something, a stash in some weird place, one, or two, one of these collectors to die, and that they say, here's everything in their collection. For me really to be super excited, I am cautiously optimistic until then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm kind of, I think if we discover more new episodes, more new missing episodes, it's not going to, if we're lucky, I think with Webb and Enemy of the World, I think the last of the big finds are going to be done. I think it's going to be piecemeal. But again, I think with the way that the process goes within the BBC, like they need to clean up the video and the film and do the, I think there's a queue out there, and I really hope I'm wrong. Like I hope that I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be slow and small rather than we're not going to find the other parts of Dalek Master Plan anytime soon.
No.
I don't know if I've heard rumors about Marco Polo. I don't think it's going to be that. It's going to be like episode 2 of this story, episode 5 of this story.
Mm-hmm.
But in talking about kind of what we'd like to see, let me just throw this out there. People have talked about the 10th Planet episode 4 as being the Holy Grail missing episodes because it's the regeneration episode. What would your personal Holy Grail be? Doesn't have to be that one. Doesn't have to be a significant story, but what would you personally like to see found?
I'm going to say, and I've said this since I was a teenager when I became a fan, the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember I got the story on a cassette tape and I listened to it a bunch of times because it was just so fascinating and the performances were so great. But to be able to see, to see what Hartnell looks like as the Abbot of Amboise would be great to see, because there's very few, like Mythmakers, there's very few pictures from the massacre. But to see Hartnell in that dual role would be great.
Okay, Rob?
Okay, so for me personally, I would want the Highlanders because I'm such a big fan of Fraser Hines and everything he's given to the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Fraser Hines has given so much to fandom over the years that I would like to see him have the personal gratification of getting to see that.
I agree.
Right. But big picture fandom, Dalek Master Plan would be amazing, even if it's 3 episodes, just because how did they pull this off? I mean, for when they did it and how they pulled it off, it's pretty incredible. It's so different from a lot of the other stuff they did, and there's so many rich characters in that even if they're one-off characters or just, it's pretty incredible. So I think big picture, I think that's kind of like the last big thing that's kind of out there lurking in the night. But I would also give the caveat that any sensible person would be any of them. I mean, if they found an episode that's supposed to be terrible, like the Space Pirates, I'd still be happy because we all thought Enemy of the World was garbage until we saw it.
Oh yeah,
right?
I remember seeing episode 3 and I was not impressed. I'm like, this is really boring.
Yeah. So I think anything that they find, I'm okay with. But I would like Highlanders because I think also as a historical story that's important. And it's a different
last historical.
And it's also a different Troughton than you see in any of his other episodes, and for the Fraser Hines component, and also too because I think that Ben and Polly really have a lot to do in that story. I think it'd be good for them. Dalek Master Plan again because you've got the scope and the width and the breadth of it, which would be nice. And outside of that, man, it's so hard. The thing too is that now having the reconstructions and the DVDs, you're like, it's harder to think of those now, right? Like it was. Like, oh, what's missing now? I can't remember. Maybe Macro Terror, just because I think parts of it were pretty scary. And I know you said The Massacre was one of yours that you wanted to see. I'm down with that too. And I think the three big ones that everyone wants are Celestial Toymaker, Marco Polo, and Dalek Master Plan. I think if we got nothing else but those three, I think people would be happy.
I also would like to see more episodes of Evil of the Daleks.
Yeah.
Because it's a great story. The telesteps don't... I haven't... Have you guys seen the animated Evil of the Daleks?
Yeah.
I haven't, but I don't know. It would be nice to see, And it's also, it's Victoria's first story.
Well, as much as Troughton is my favorite Doctor, any of those that they find, I'm happy with.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to choose, since Ben, you took The Massacre, I'd like to see the Myth Makers, simply because, again, it's more just I'm into. I'd also, I mean, even though we have them animated, like I'd love to see Evil of the Daleks, Power of the Daleks, Macro Terror, simply because I know with Evil they took. When you look at episode 2, because they had the actual episode with the animated, they took some liberties with it, which I understand. If you're animated, you're going to go whole out, but it would be nice to have that. See them in their original kind of 60s veneer. And plus with Power, it's because it's not just a good episode, it's a historically relevant one. Like, I would argue that needs to be number 4 in Rob's list of essential files.
Yeah, I was just trying to limit it. I mean, everybody's going to have different takes on that too, and that's one of the joys is that someone will bring up an episode and you're like, oh yeah, you're right. Anything in the monster season I want to see. Anything from season 5 of Troughton. I'd
also like to throw in there. I'd like to see the Savages.
Yeah.
It's Steven's last story,
but I think
it has Frederick Jagger giving a great performance as Jano.
And I think, things like the Savages, the Massacre, and Space Pirates, which are kind of like toiling in a weird sense of obscurity, I think they would be completely vindicated and viewed through completely different lenses if they were found intact.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely no one wants to see the Space Pirates recovered. Would that be a fair statement?
No.
I'd be happy if they did because it's something we don't have. And I think... having gone through the experience of Enemy of the World, again, I'm not going to dismiss any story as being terrible sight unseen now.
That's fair.
Yeah, especially since even if you got the audio, there's something about seeing it play in real time, like with Enemy of the World. Like, I could never really get the audio. I'd listen to it and be like, okay, but seeing it played out was really just eye-opening. it was the same thing with Evil of the Daleks. I mean, Evil of the Daleks and Fury from the Deep. They work as animated reconstructions, but the audio is it's great. But I just want to see how these actually were blocked out, especially Fury, because I get the feeling it's a lot more claustrophobic. The animated version is that it feels a lot more insular. Where, like when I heard the audio, I thought it works great as an audio. I know I think we've got a little bit more time left before we start to close. So
We've got
maybe
about 20 minutes.
20 minutes? Oh, okay. Well, let's maybe start with think about parting thoughts. Any other thoughts about missing episodes?
Well, there's one thing I want to bring up before that we talked about before we started recording. Let's say someone wanted to watch a reconstruction or watch an animated episode. Where are some good legal resources they can go to check those out?
Well, we've talked about with audios. We talked about your local library
and Audible. They're all available on Audible as well too.
Audible. I think with a lot of the loose cannon reconstructions, I think, are now on YouTube.
They are, but the best resource I have found for them is they're on the Internet Archive. All of them are on the Internet Archive.
Oh, okay, good. That's better.
Now, what's interesting is if you go to the BBC Radio 4 website, right? Sometimes they will, when I know the first couple of the Big Finish Tom Baker seasons, about a year and a half after they were released, they played them on BBC Radio 4, right? And then slowly I'm looking, and they're running, every once in a while, they're running the audios for the episodes. They ran, about a year ago, I think they ran The Abominable Snowman audio, right? So you can look for stuff like that. And your library is a great resource. And also, too, I think if you go to, a convention like Chicago TARDIS or Console Room or Galley, and you go to the dealer room, a lot of the dealers that are going to sell things, and you should be able to tell who's up and who's not. But most of the Doctor Who conventions don't have really shady dealers, right? So you'll be able to find a lot of people there that have versions of his stuff that's done really well that you can purchase, and kind of go that route. And also, a lot of the dealer rooms at your favorite convention have tons of books that are kind of related to this as well. So if you want to get like the photo book from Power of the Daleks that came out years ago, you can get that. But also video rooms are a great resource because a lot of the video rooms are showing some of this stuff as well. So that is, that's one way to do that as well.
And I don't know if it's all available on BritBox, but some of the missing episode animations I know are on BritBox, but certain ones aren't.
I know Power of the Daleks definitely is. I know that The Invasion is, but only because the company that did the animation went out of business.
Yeah.
I'm at the top of my head, I'm not sure what other animated. I know they've been phasing them in slowly. So
they have Wheel in Space, which is interesting.
Well, that's a reconstruction, though.
Yeah, but see, people can still find it.
Oh yes. And I know on AMC Plus, from time to time, they have had Fury from the Deep and the animated Fury and the animated Evil of the Daleks. From time to time, but everything's kind of a bit of a kerfuffle there. So
yeah, and it'd be interesting to see with the switch over to Disney, because I know my understanding is that they have access to the new series only. I've heard rumors about the classic series, but that's in the, I'll believe it when I read the headline, when they do a formal announcement. But it would be, because part in prepping for this panel, I was thinking, hypothetically, if it worked out with Disney, I could see, since the current production team would like to do more spin-offs, I could see one of those spin-offs, if you're going to do what Star Trek does, which is program for specific audiences, you do you take one of the longer classic series episodes and you do that as a series. So like Marco Polo, you animate it because Disney wants Doctor Who more kind of animated shows.
Yeah.
Marco Polo, 7 weeks animated. Dalek Master Plan, 13 weeks animated. So you at least have something in the queue. But I think we're living in interesting times for missing episodes now.
Oh yes.
Because first, you've never had very few. Before it used to be just the interest of a few, kind of, really super obsessed fans who maybe needed to get more of a social life. And I'm talking about me. Just be clear, I was talking about me. But now what we're seeing is because you have a newer element of fandom that wants to see this stuff, whether it's out of history, out of a sense of curiosity, out of just being a student of like how TV was made. It's really, I as much as part of me wants to be that never say never, that kind of it's not going to happen. I also want to be pleasantly surprised. I don't think I'm that cynical yet.
Oh, me too. I want to be. That's what I liked about hearing the enemy. Because all we had heard around the time of Enemy and Web being discovered is, well, there's going to be something discussed. There's going to be a big announcement about missing episodes at the end of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, if they had said, "Hey, we found the remaining 5 episodes of the Space Pirates," I probably would have been happy. Because it's something. It's not nothing.
Right. And even if the episode they find is not your favorite episode of choice, it opens up other doors.
Because once you find an episode, you then find clues that can lead you to future episodes.
Yes. And it also, I think it kind of branches you off in other areas too. Like, if you watch, let's say, the Space Pirates episode 2, oh, what else has Patrick Troughton been, or what else did Fraser Hines or Wendy Padbury do? It's like it's a continuous branch.
Yeah, and I think another thing we talked about a little bit ahead of time too is where are people looking for these episodes, right? A lot of times people are looking in Commonwealth countries now, but also places that used to fall in the domain of the British Empire, right? So places like the Sudan and like Mozambique and Zaire, all these countries where British programming was distributed. But where this gets tricky is there's places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, where they are geographic and geopolitical hotspots.
Yeah.
So we can't put boots on the ground to go to TV stations and look. There's a belief that a bunch of episodes are in Iran, for example, but they can't physically get to them. So, we're outside of our own sort of, wouldn't it be cool if this happened and this happened and this happened with the Doctor that we all have, right? The woulda, coulda, shoulda with missing episodes is sort of the secondary thing. Like, what if we can get into all the TV stations in Iran that bought Doctor Who in the 60s and 70s? Can we get, what can we, can we go back to Hong Kong and look again? Where can they physically send the manpower to go look? And then the other part of that is the negotiation process, right? Like, how do we get this stuff back to the archives without, somebody stepping in and outbidding my bid, or, basically taking advantage of the situation for their own gains, right? How do we do that? So outside of the actual aspect of time and decay and physical materials decaying, we're playing the searching game. And then it's also, once we've located it, how do we get it and get it securely back? And that's another aspect of this.
And the other aspect you have to consider, and I don't know if this has changed, is the BBC does not pay for missing episodes.
No.
Don't they just pay for shipping?
Possibly, but they're not, you wouldn't get a finder's fee if you found an episode.
Right.
And I don't think they prosecute anymore, though.
No. They're like, thank you. Basically, it's my understanding that, they find the episode, they make a copy, they give you back your copy. And that's that.
Which it did not used to.
couple. What? Sorry, Rob.
It used to not be like that too.
No.
For the longest time, it was like, I don't want to tell them I've got it because I don't want them to, be draconian and come after me, right? So that part of it's changed a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that just bugs me a little bit too is, and this is just once again, this is all rumor, so I don't. This isn't 100%. It's like supposedly Phil Morris has more episodes, but he wants money from the BBC. So supposedly he's holding them hostage. I don't know, and I kind of hope that's not. I think with TV, I think it should be something that's. I understand. He went to Nigeria to find those episodes, and it's very harrowing. But no one asked him to. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful he did.
Yeah, and basically his business model is he was going to Nigeria to change some of basically to fix a station's equipment. And part of that was his entree to get the episodes. He kind of did a bit of a bait and switch. And I know there are rumors about Web of Fear episode 3 that the person, once he found out what he had, was like, oh, now I'm in the money.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for the rest of us, it'd be like if I found 10th Planet episode 4 in my closet, I'd be like, here you go, BBC, just send me the DVD when it's ready.
Yeah. So we got about 10 minutes left, so we may want to wrap up.
Okay, so any parting thoughts from our panel?
Watch missing episodes however you want to watch them, but enjoy them. Have fun. Just enjoy that part of history, that is the Doctor Who history.
Rob?
No, I think that's pretty spot on. I think, too, that as interesting as the actual missing episodes is, the search of it and sort of finding out the process of it is also fascinating as well. If you're interested in how television's made and distributed and anything archival, I think that's fascinating, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, for a lot of newer fans who may not understand why we're talking about 60, 70-year-old television, the way I always try to frame it with other people, especially newer fans, is that when you watch Doctor Who at any point, you are watching a history of television production.
Yeah.
You're going from shot is on stage to mix of live action and mix of studio and location filming to integration of CSO to production design to lighting. And even the new series has a kind of similar flow to it in terms of history.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is that even though these are not that this was not just a British thing. We don't have the first 10 years of Johnny Carson. No. There's a lot of television that we just don't have because at the time we didn't think about it. But this is also, if you have to be cynical about it, it's new Doctor Who content. But for those of us who really love it, it's a chance to. I never thought I would ever see Power of the Daleks, or Evil of the Daleks, or Tomb of the Cybermen, or Fury from the Deep, or even The Invasion, without Nicholas Courtney butting in and giving a little narration, because this is new stuff and it's new to you. And there's, even if you're just enjoying telesnaps are a great way to kind of see this is how things were set up back in the day. Audios, it's like listening to Big Finish, only it's actual real Doctor Who produced in the studio for your entertainment. And so I think all three of us would agree, missing episodes, just because we don't have film of them, they're still enjoyable. They're still worth it. And your enjoyment of Who will be that will be improved.
And I'd also like to suggest to people viewing the panel is, there's and I'll hopefully we'll post some links later, but there's a Broadcast Who is a great site to learn about episodes and how they were transmitted. Another great one is the Millennium Effect. But also what I find really fun is like going on, like looking up old Radio Times inserts and seeing like what aired like around the time the Ice Warriors episode 5 aired. And it's just and it was the Dick Van Dyke Show right after Doctor Who. So, I just find that stuff fun. I would recommend, if you want to know more, research it out.
Yeah, there's a website called epiguides.com, which is geared specifically toward Chicago, but it lists every Doctor Who episode in order as it was shown. So I can honestly say that on October 4th, 1975, I saw my first Doctor Who episode, and I was 8 years old.
What's really
And
cool
that's
about what's really cool about the Broadcast 2 episode is you can get a country by country listing of
Mhm.
how all the episodes came in to be. Also, you can get a state by state listing too, which is
Ooh.
really neat.
Mhm.
And for America.
cool. So Rob, any parting thoughts?
No, other than I just love talking about this stuff. It's a fascinating history of the show. And, I think the missing episodes make us appreciate the ones we have
I agree.
much more.
Okay, and so before we leave, anything either of you would like to promote, get out there, kind of hype up?
Well, if you're at Concert Room this weekend, we're doing part 4 of the Dalek Master Plan on the main stage. So check it out.
Mm-hmm.
For Concert Room radio players, excuse me. No, we're actually, I found it, and that was going to be the big surprise. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I want to talk about there's a new Who's Inside that's coming out soon about classic Doctor Who, and I have an essay in there about the 3 Doctors as we celebrate the anniversary of that episode. So look for that. And I also have a couple things in Cosmic Press's Doctor Who anthologies. I'm also part of the needcoffee.com Weekend Justice podcast, and completely separate from the world of Doctor Who, I am part of Modern Musicology, which is a music podcast with a couple of people that are also Doctor Who fans on the ESO network that you can check out as well.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, you can find me on Amazon. Just Google Gordon Domowski Amazon. I have a Sherlock Holmes story published by Belanger Books in Sherlock Holmes, A Year of Mystery, 1884. Chicago Doctor Who Meetup is will be hopefully holding its first hybrid event on January 18th. You can find Chicago Doctor Who Meetup on Facebook, meetup.com, Twitter @Who Meetup. And that's basically, and I'll be at various panels causing trouble and basically, being obnoxious. So I want to thank everyone thank you watching on YouTube. I also want to thank Ben and Rob for taking time to join us.
Yeah.
And hope
Thank
you
you
enjoyed
for
the rest.
having me.
Yeah. And enjoy the rest of Console Room, 10 Years in the TARDIS.
Yes.
Bye, all.
Bye.